Good evening, Taira Chavra, Taira Chabura of Kola Taira Kula, enjoying our time, cruising through Taira Shabbat Peh, being led by the Rambam, according to the Rebbe's Takana, one Perek per day. And we are holding by Hilchas Avodas Kochavin, Perek Dalid. And today we're going to, as Reb Levi Nimravsky so eloquently put on the cover page, we're going to explore a city, the concept called an Ir Hanidachas. Actually, one of the mitzvahs that we know, this is a mitzvah that we're just yetzalim with Atayra, Lahagdil Tayra La'adira. This has never occurred in Bnei Yisrael. Very complicated to happen, and we'll see in today's Rambam why. Okay. Before we get there, I promised in the last year that I want to dedicate a few minutes to the halacha l'maisa of all the halachas we discussed in Perek Gimel, which was discussed, which the Rambam introduced us to the dinim of idols that are asur and graven images and suras lanoi. So I want to share with you halacha l'maisa, and not only I want to give credit where credit is due, I want to give a plug into a very special print edition of the Rambam called Rambam HaMevur. I'll show it to you in a second. And at the bottom, alongside every Perek, here we go, the Rambam HaMevur, the Chitrik edition, has in every Perek on the bottom, it has halacha l'maisa on every Perek Rambam. Very, very important, extremely helpful. Mechaber Ramah Shachtaz, and down to the Achronim, some of them. So we're going to zero in for a second to the halachas of graven images. I started mentioning that on what the Rambam says, Tzuras Adam is Asur. So the Mechaber brings it in Siman Kuf Mem Aleph Sivav and says that there's an opinion Shlei Asur b'Tzuras Adam al Dafka b'Tzura Adam Shleima b'Chol Yivarab. Only if it's a complete person. I want to share something fascinating about that. Meaning that if you have only one dimension, or even two dimensions, you see only part of him. It's not sculptured all around his face or all his sides. It is mutter. Where do we rely on it? Every Yiddish home has many dolls. So there's a mabit that we rely on that discusses the marit that we rely on, discusses that if it's for games, it's a different story. But the metzias is what we do is most Yereim Ushleimim, make sure it's not shalom. They cut off a piece of the ear, they make a hole in the nose. And I want to share about that something fascinating. We have at the end of Eastern Parkway, we have the Brooklyn Museum. And they have a whole section on Mitzrayim. And it was Parsha Shmois, and I decided to take a class, an excelling class in Limud Torah, to see the museum. It's to live Parshas HaShavua. You mamish see many artifacts from that time. Imagine seeing a whip, the same type of whip that they held in Mitzrayim, and seeing we describe in Parshas Yasher describes Rechev uParashav v'Shalishim al Kuloi, that the officers were on top. They mamish have inscriptions from that time or around that period of exactly what the Torah is describing. They have mummies there. We describe the Yachnatu and different. It's fascinating. The only problem is it's one huge getchget, isn't it? They're all getchget up over there. So how are you allowed to go see? So later on in Perek Ches, the Rambam is going to describe how a goy is mevatel his avodah zarah, which is that a yid it can't be mevatel his avodah zarah if it was served, as we'll see later on. But a goy can be mevatel it, and he has to do a ma'aseh that indicates that you see his machshava is that he's mevatel it from being an elikah. And one of them is the fact that they would break off the nose, similar to what we do to make it ois tzuros adam. They break off the nose. And what's fascinating is you come into the museum, shkoyach. And you come into the museum and you want to see these gets, all of them are broken noses. So big inscription on the wall. Why the broken noses? That the dealers of these getchkis, they were afraid of a supernatural, superhuman powers that these getchkis might have. We're talking about hundreds, even thousands of years ago. And therefore, what they did to annul that power was break the nose. So that's exactly what we need according to the Rambam. and therefore you're allowed to look at it. There's many inyanim to look. Maybe one day we'll take all our dear chaverim at the end of Hilchos Avodas Zarah on a tour of the. A good idea, Maisha. Mendel, Yassi, Reb Levi, Reb Fishel. We'll go on a trip together. I think it makes sense to me. And we'll go see many wonderful things. But one of the things it's mevatel, so therefore, Yirei Moshleim, again, as the Mechaber says, is only if it's B'cholei Barav, Al Tzurus Roish, a Guf, Beloy Roish, if it's a head without a body, or a body without a head. Ein Bashum. So the Ramah writes, this is the minhag. The Shach writes, Hamachmer Tavel Bracha, that if a person is stringent, even part of the body is Tavel Bracha. But the Rambam writes, but the Shach writes, when is he Machmer? That this is afke if it's a full face, it's a full head, or a full body. That's Tavel Bracha if you avoid that as well. But if you make just half of the tzura, must you make one eye, one ear, means it's a side portrait. Kolachai. B'cholofin, the pictures, the heter that we rely on to take pictures, even if they have a front and both eyes, unlike the shach, is that it doesn't stick out at all. It's minute, doesn't have a shear, it's printed on one page. Okay. Now, we're going to move on. A little later, I want to relate to the recent passing of Reb Gershon Edelstein, a Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshivas Panovich, and that passed away Yotzivon yesterday. And I want to dedicate a few words and a few very special things that I've learned from him as a Manal, a school principal. I want to, this year is dedicated generously by Reb one second. Reb Yonason Azrielant, our dear friend, the Chassan. And one second. Here we go. Elili Nishmas, his mother, Aya Bas Rafal Hakoyin. She was nifter. She was nifter a year ago, 11 months ago. Sorry, no, a year ago, on Tes Sivan. Okay, or Yud Sivan. And now to Perek Daled, and we're going to discuss the din of Ir Hanidachas, a city which was pushed towards Avodah Zarah and was convinced to follow. And what's very interesting is, note, there's the people that convince and persuade the city to serve Avodah Zarah, and then there's the city that worship, and there's a whole bunch of criteria for each one of them. Halacha Aleph, Madiche Ir Yisrael, those that persuaded a city between the Yidden, Harei Elu Niskalin, those that convinced are stoned. Even though we know that the skill is only for those that worship, it's as if they worshiped. Even though they didn't, they just convinced. They convinced others until the city, those inhabitants of the city worship. Those that actually worship, they have a different misa. They're killed besayif, they're put to the sword. Providing that they actually served idols. Or they accepted the idol as their deity and as their god. We described earlier, there's those at Taichai and the Rambam that they have to verbalize and say Atalakai or whatever. Where do you find in Torah that Yidden were warned not only not to serve idols themselves, but not to convince others, persuade others? Should not be heard on your lips, in your mouth. Now, here we start with modifiers. The city can only become an Ir Hanidachas mitoicha. They have to be inhabitants of that city that they're persuading. We know that the Shvatim receive different portions of Eretz Yisrael. They have to be from that Shevet, from where that city is a portion of. Shenemar mikirbecha, from between you. It says anashim bliyal, yat anashim bliyal, v'yadichu es yoshvei iram. So it says mikirbecha, from between you, v'yadichu es yoshvei iram. So mikirbecha indicates that they have to be from that Shevet, and yoshvei iram, their city. So they have to be living there. Ba'achiyu madichel, another condition is the shiyu madichel shnayim or yasser al shnayim. They have to be at least 2 or more. Shenamar, when the pasuk describes those persuading the inhabitants, it says Yatsu Anashim Bnei Blial, terrible people, Anashim plural. V'yadichu es yoshvei iram, and they're the ones that convinced the inhabitants of the city. Now, ba'achi yadichu ruba, they're not going to be nidon as madichim until they persuade the majority of the city. V'yu hamudachim mimea v'adruba shel shevet. The minimum is 100 people to be considered a city and not a kfar, as we'll see, and the maximum that can still be considered is roiv, the majority of a shevet. And keep this in mind, because after, when they're doing the due process, they're going to afterwards have to make a count. So stay tuned. If the majority of the shevet was persuaded, then they're judged like, if it's the majority of the shevet, if they're one too many, the majority of the shevet, they stop having the din of ir nidachas, and then they're judged like a whole bunch of private people, private citizens that served Avodah Zarah, that their din is ve'edim basra, is skila, b'shoigig is chayiv chatos. Now, shenemar, why is this so? Why is there a cap at the end of the beginning? Shenemar yoshvei ir, those inhabitants of the city. What's a city? Loik kfar katan, not a village. Loik krach gadol, not a metropolitan, not a very big city. It's a city. If it's less than 100, then kfar katan. It's a small village. That's not what the Torah didn't apply the din. We'll soon see. Ir nidachas is not like a private person. I'll just give one example of the difference between them. If a regular person, Leider, Achman al-Itzlan, serves Avodah Zarah, they put him to death. First of all, beskila, not besayif, stoning and not to the sword. And what happens with all his grana, all his geld? Goes to Haruge Bezdin, Mamayna Liyashem. Their money goes to his ears. Masha Enkein, if they were put together, they were put to death, besayif, because it was Ir Nidachas, the entire city. Oh, Veskol Shlola Tigbois, they have to collect all their booty, all their valuables, put it in the Rechoiva Shalir. We'll see soon a description where it has to be burnt, and it has to be burnt. Everything gets burnt. So you have to know, if the second they hit the majority of the shevet, boom, they can't have the din of Ir Nidachas anymore, and they get judges private. V'chein, a whole bunch of more modifiers. V'chein idichu anashim, if it wasn't anashim bliyal, it was nashim, women, children, oiktanim, children, oishidichu yachid, it was one man, charismatic, Meshiganer, and he convinced them. Oishidichum hudach miyuta, he persuaded, but it was the minority of the city, less than half, or less than the majority. Oishahudchum aleim, or they on their own, came to the realization. The flip side of the Kuzri, the king, came to an understanding. Then he came to review the Levi to debate it, but he came to his own conclusion. Sorry, the two people that came to persuade them didn't live in the city; they lived elsewhere. Ain danim but din ir nidachas. The din of ir nidachas does not apply to them. Harei el hareim ki yechidim. They will remain like private people. Sha'avdu avodah zarah, that transgressed and sinned and served idols. The cycling kol misha avar, and in which case we will stone all those that transgressed to mamainon, and their guilt will be liyashen to their ears. Akishar haruge bezin, like any other people that were put to death by bezin. Halacha gimel. Ein dan ir anidachas. We do not apply the din of ir anidachas elba bezin shel shivim ve'echad. Okay, we said din nefashis requires a bezdin of esrim b'shloisha, 23 dayanim. But ir nidachas, when you're going to wipe out a city, you need the bezdin agadol, 71. These are the bezdin that sits by lishkas hagazis. Shenemar, why so? It says you should take out that man, or that woman. Asher asus hadavar razeh el sharecha. You should bring them to your gates. Now, this pasuk is referring to a private person that sinned and did Avodah Zarah. And by him it says El Shorecha. In his case, you're allowed to bring him. It suffices to bring them to the Bezdin of that city of 23. Yechidim neragim Bezdin shel kol shar v'shar, which is 23. Ve'ein hamerubim, however, merubim meaning an ir nidachas, when you're killing many. Neragin elu Bezdin agadol. That's not El Shorecha is not enough. Halacha dalet. Now, cities, specific ones that can never become an ir nidachas. Ein achas me'orei miklot nase ir nidachas. one of the cities of refuge that the Eibishter gave, 6 in Eretz Yisrael, 3 we're still awaiting, Keni Knizvi Kadmoini, in the Eivra Yarden, which take it from Yad will have. They can never become an Aaron Dach. Shenem, as it says, Ba'achas Orecha, in one of your cities. This is not one of your cities. This is Lo Nitan Licholik. It's a Matanat Shevet Levi. Lo Yerushalayim Nasis Aaron Dachas. Yerushalayim doesn't belong to become an Aaron Dachas. Yerushalayim is Chalakos Shvat. Mustn't split between the Shvat. And this is all there's together. The Einois in Aaron Dachas Besfar, on the border. You never make an Aaron Dachas. Why so? Simple reason. You're endangering the whole land by breaking one wall. It's available to the public. Here we go. The aim basin you're closing in on yourself. The aim basin echad oisa shalosh ayaros hanidacha zu b'tzad zu. One basin. Now we're talking about the same basin. It can only be one basin. The basin Agados Yerushalayim. So what does it mean? One basin cannot make one near the other. So the Rambam learns maybe different dayanim could. Same dayanim cannot be the ones to charge. The Raiva disagrees with this. He says it can only Yehuda and Galil. Can't do 3. According to Rambam, if they're far away from each other, you can make 3 Irani Dachas. And more. Halacha hey. Ein oisin Irani Dachas. Another one to limit us. You can make an Irani Dachas at sheyadichuhu madicheh b'lashon rabim. The verbiage, okay, the word they're going to use have to be in a plural. In a sense, let's go, let's do. The royal we. And they tell the people that when they're persuading the town, the city, Neilach v'navid, let's go and let's serve. Or Neilach and zabech, let's go and let's slaughter, let's offer. Or Neilach v'nakter, this is the shyness of what we learned earlier. Let's go and bring Titus, let's burn incense. Or Neilach v'naseach, let's go and pour libation. Or Neilach v'nishtach, let's go and let's bow. Or Neilach v'nekala belakal, let's go and officially accept as our God. Vehem shaimim, the people, now another, they have to listen and follow through. The people of the cities listened and decided to do it, and they went and served it derech avodasa, if it's a specific, unique avodah, or any of the 4 avodas we described earlier in yesterday's Perek. No, let's go, Chabra. Wonderful, Meister. Haktara, Ktira, which is Zvicha, Shechting, libation, Mishtachva, and Nisuch. Can I say the same twice? No? Okay. So one of these 4, Oishe Kiblu, and Nishtachava. Oishe Kiblu Belika, they accepted it. Ir Hanidachas, Shaloi Niskaimu Ba, Ubandicha Kol Atramel. What happens? They didn't fill all the criteria. They didn't match the checklist. Hey, what do you do with them? They served Avodah Zarah. The people served, not the Madichim. Madichim not necessarily. Masrin. First of all, you have to have Asra and Eidim for each one of them, right? You have to have a person coming and warning each one. Like any person. And they will be stoned as private people that serve the Avodah Zarah. As we said, their money will go. Now, how does the din go? Once it filled the criteria that we mentioned, okay? The people that persuaded the city were 2, and they were men, and they came, they lived there, and they were from that Shevet, and they said Neilach and Zabech, and the people followed through, and they went, and all the details on there, and there was a city that had more than 100 people. Now, after they fit the bill, now we have to check, did they pass Rubai Shel Shevet? That's a much bigger count, okay? So let's see what you do. Beis Din Hagadol Shochim V'Dershin V'Choykrin. First thing, Beis Din Hagadol sends delegates, sends messengers to check and to cross-examine until it's clear with proof, clear proof. Shehutcha Kol Ha'ir, the entire city, Oirub, or the majority, V'Chazlo V'Etz Kochavin, and they have returned to pre-Terach days or Terach days to idol worship. Acharkach, the next thing. Sholchim lam shnei talmidei chachamim lachziram, lazhiram ulachziram. They sent 2 talmidei chachamim to warn them, and im chazu v'asur tshuva, if they taka repent, they did. Mutav is great. V'im yamdu bibaltam. However, if they maintain their narrative mistake, Beis Din mitzavin l'chol Yisrael. Beis Din commands and decrees upon the entire nation. Lale saleim latzava. Let's bear arms. Let's go all against them. And the Rambam at the end, in the last siman, and the last sif of Perek Daled, describes the greatness of obliterating negative and bad from between the Yidden. And it gives us a sense. So we'll have to wait till there. But the Rambam, they all bear arms and they go against. They lay siege. They start a battle. Until, welcome Rabbi Yossi, until the city falls, which means the walls are broken into. Sheti baka. Once they broke through the chaimis, miyad, immediately, marbin lam bote dinim. You set up a whole bunch of, what are they, like those war hospitals, those temporary, what are they called? Field hospitals. They set up field basements, a whole bunch of them. And they start judging them. Anyone that there are two people to testify that they served the Avodas Kochavim after they were warned, so you set them aside. If at that point you found that those that served Be'edim Basra were the minority of the city, so it's like a whole bunch of private people, Cyclonisim. Ushara Ir Nitzo. The rest of the city will be saved. Abiyasi. Nimtzu Ruba. After you went through this count and you found the majority of the city lie there, served the Avodah Zarah. Mal Nesel Beis Nagadol. They bring them up to Beis Nagadol in Yerushalayim. All the people. Imagine that. V'horgin kol il she'avdu b'sayif. All those that have served the Avodah Zarah are killed, put to the sword. Umakin is kol nefesh asher ba. Kol nefesh adam ba lefi charev. All of them, men. We said those that served. And Taf v'nashim as well. Taf, they assume if they're the children of these people, v'nashim and the women, imhut chakula. All the women and children, if they serve. If it's just the majority, makin is kol anashim, then you have to already ensure that every child and the women are the women of the men that have been the Avodah Zarah. Sorry, in the case of women, they have to. I think the Rambam's lashon sounds like it's the wives of those that. In the words, are Rishonim that hold that only if they themselves. But they count the men. Whether the majority, all of them were persuaded, regardless how many, whether it was everybody or half or the majority, they stone those that persuaded, regardless if they actually themselves serve the Avodah Zarah. And now the next stage. What do you do with all their belongings? You bring all their booty, all their possessions into the town square. What happens if the city doesn't have a town square? Okay, Nebuch. Okay, even the little Shtetlach in Russia, we went on Shlichus for Pesach to hack the Pletzer. The only thing they own is a town square. So you put everything on pause and you make a rechayiv, you make a town square. What happens if the town square is outside of the city? The lashon is al toich rechayiva. You bring their belongings into the middle. You build. This starts a construction process. Okay, they build a chayma, a wall around the city, and at that point, you bring them into the Rechayiv, which is the middle of the city. All living beings. The surfing is called Nefesh Chaya, the animals. The surfing is called Shlala, all its possessions. Im HaMedina, together with the city itself. And as we'll see, it is prohibited to rebuild such a city. Osrei Fasa, it's burning. Mitzvah say it's a positive commandment. Shenemar v'sarafta ba'eisha sa'ir, that's called Shlala. You burn the city and all its belongings. So a positive mitzvah. Halacha zayin. Nichse tzadikim shabasoicha. What happens with those that are righteous that you're not going to be putting to death? Nichse tzadikim shabasoicha v'heim sha'ar. Who are the tzadikim? Shar yeshvei ish lo yudchulim ruba. They weren't persuaded with the majority. Nisrafim bechlal shlala. Their belongings get burned together. Ahoil b'yashvu sham. Because they live there. Mamoinon avad. What we call oil rasha. Hang out with the right people. Anyone that once the city was the verdict was the city is Ir Dachas, then at that point, anyone that derives any benefit, bekolshu, from anything in the city, loike achas, you get malchus. Should not stick to your hand. Do not appreciate me'uma in the slightest min from what was is excommunicated, but was set aside for being burnt. Halacha ches. Now, what happens? Fascinating case. The city was decided to be Ir Dachas, and you had a whole bunch of Eidim, and these Eidim, there's two people, they were going from person to person and watching, either they were watching how someone else was doing Hasra, and they were the Eidim watching how all these people are being Oived, and then, based in Paskins, the Ir Dachas, at that point, all the belongings of the city, what's the din? It's all doesn't belong to them. It's all doesn't have a shear. Halachically, and not only that, it's due to this din, and you're not allowed to derive any benefit, even the people there, obviously. So it becomes hefker. Now these two Eidim became Eidim Zaymimim. Two people came and said, these two guys that just testified about person to person or made it the majority by testifying against the last person, these two people, they were with us. They were in Hawaii. They weren't there, B'chlo. And now you took off the last person that made it more than Miyuta. All these people are just going to be acquitted to a certain degree, right? We have to figure this out, Agav, because the Raiva disagrees. Agav, we said earlier that Beis Nagadol sends shlochim, and the shlochim warned them, and if they did tshuva, they're good to go. The Raiva says, I don't understand. Beautiful idea, but I never found that after they had Asra and Maisa, we learned earlier, even Turkey Dibber for a Mekal, for a Megadeth doesn't help. Right afterwards. He doesn't understand why they're on. Maybe it saves it midin ir ani dachas. Anyways, so back to where we were. So ir ani dachas who's the two Eidim that testified that based on their testimony, we're burning all the possessions. Huzamu, they were rebuffed as Eidim. They were proven to be elsewhere. Anything that exists in the city can be. It's pronounced hefker. Anyone can grab. It's free for all because the people made it free at that point. And you're allowed to enjoy from it. Why shari huzamu? So you're allowed to enjoy from it because it's not anymore the possessions of Ernei Dachas. It doesn't belong to them because they were mafkir. Now, why takish? A second, their din was paskined. They have made it hefker. Even the righteous ones. You'll ask 1 second. The people that served Avodah Zarah, for sure their possessions, the etzem, are hefker. Why? Because if they're private people, the second husmoy down, they're not the majority, and b'meila, and they're done, they're nidan ki yichidim, their money should be going to liyosheim. So if they're mafkir michayim from within their life, it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to anyone they have. The righteous ones, they're not either getting killed, but their mamaina was supposed to be burned, so they were mafkir also. And therefore, anyway, now ve'ena nivnas lo'olam. Next, then this city can never be rebuilt. Ve'chola boina loika. Anyone that rebuilds the city will be lashed with malchus. Shenamar that says loisi bana oid. It should not be rebuilt. Umuter la'asais. However, it should not be rebuilt to its previous initial glory. Or muter la'asais ganas pardesim. You could make out of it gardens and orchards. Shenamar loisi bana oid. It should not be again rebuilt. Again, built means rebuilt. Now, what happens if there's a caravan going through that city? You have a caravan going from place to place. They went through Ir Nidachas and they were persuaded together. They served Avodah Zarah. If they were there for 30 days, they are put to the sword as well, just like the inhabitants of the city, and their gelt is farfal. The im lav, however, if they weren't there for 30 days, they will get killed paid in Basra, hem beskila. However, mamoinum liyosheim, their money goes to their families, like any eruge basin, like private people. That's why they're not neither besayif. Now, nichsei anshe medina acheres shoyu mifkadim besayich. We said kol shlolo tikpoits, all the possessions you gather. What happens? You have over here Mr. Gabriel Gvir, and he has a whole bunch of. He took as collateral. He gave a loan to someone from the town next city next over. He gave him a loan, and he took as collateral a whole bunch of flashlights. Good. He took a whole bunch of flashlights, and now they're burning. His city was proclaimed as Irani Dachas. These flashlights don't belong to the people in the city. They're collateral. They're taken as a mashkin, for example, or they were given to, actually could be a mashkin is different. Mufkadin over here was given for safekeeping, but it belongs to other city. Could be a mashkin is different. I need to check that, because a mashkin, he has a certain bias over it. He has a certain bias because it's, I don't know, not sure. So they were given for safekeeping these flashlights. Okay, that's better a case. And even though they accepted responsibility, which means that they have certain connection to it, still ein nisrafin. They do not get burnt as if it's their possessions. Al yachzul, but then they go back to their rightful owner. Shnamar, the pasuk says, shlala, it's booty. V'loy shlal chaberet, not from its neighboring city. Nichsei harishoyim shotchu. What happens the other way around? There's rishoyim, the wicked people that have served, and their possessions are now held for safekeeping in a different city. That already depends. If they gathered it in the time when it was meant to be burnt and stuff, at that point, we don't burn it, rather we give it to the yarshim. Now, behema. How does that happen? You have two partners that own a behema. One lives in here, one doesn't. And they both own a behema. What do you do with halba behema? It's asur. It has in it isur. The second, it has the din, like we'll see, like a shar and iskal. It's considered a treif at that point. The isa shikain. What happens if it's a doe? Then it's muteres. You could split it, but an animal you can't. Breathing the same air, blowing the same, pumping the same blood. It was slaughtered. Asura bana. At that point, it's asur to derive benefits, enjoy it. Kasher and iskal, same din, like a shar and iskal. If a shar, an ox, gored and killed a person, the din is by, interestingly enough, we'll learn it later on because we're going through Kol HaTorah. The shar that gored and killed has to be judged in a basin of Esrim B'Shleish of 23, just like a person, and it has to be before Neha, and there has to be there's a whole due process. Now, once they paskin this, it's going to be put to death. It's going to be stoned, like a person that killed. Yeah. Elamai, it ran off, smelled the danger, took a spin, and someone else chapped it and shechted it. That's why it was shechted instead of being niska. It's asur bana. The second it was paskin, done. Asur bana kashar niskal sheniskal sara roish. They hear bein shal nashim shaba. Whether it's men's here or women's here, mutar bana, you're allowed to enjoy, and the reason is because, as we'll see, this is it says tik boitz v'sarafta. You gather it and burn it. So this excludes anything that demands another action to be able to gather it. If you have to first cut it off the tree and then gather it and then burn it, that's not what the Torah was referring to when it said you have to burn it. And therefore, Sarah Roish has to be cut. You have to have a haircut before if you want to gather it as metaltlin and burn it. Okay, they're not needed b'srei for these people. And in the same way, fruits that are on a tree, like we'll see. So Sarah Roish ben shel nashim shaba mutar ba'ana. Avapeya nachris, if it is a sheitel from a different person's here, hareu mechlal shlala, and it's mobile and asur. Now, peirasam chubarim shebasaycha, fruit that are connected to the tree, mutarim, they're allowed to be eaten and benefit. It's not, doesn't fall under the tikvah tzarafta. Shnamar tikvah tzarafta misha enim mechosar ela kibutz tzreifa. The Torah is commanding this great grand bonfire only over things that the only thing they're lacking is to be gathered and to burnt. Yatsu, this excludes payers and chubarim if they're connected to trees. Shein mechusar and klisha v'kibbutz v'sreifa. They require another action of first plucking them off the harvesting, taking off the tree. V'adin l'sar roish, as we said. Vein tzarich loymar ha'ilanis atzman. How much more so the trees themselves that they require much more. So they mutar barein shel yoshem. In that case, there still is bailus. Interestingly enough, and they go to the ears of the people that were put to death beside. Now, yeah, anything that would. Well, we burn the city down. Yeah, it's a separate din. They burn the city down, so that's already. But that's not mitzad tikboitz shlala b'tisrei. Here we're talking about the trees now. Right. I mean, in many cases they'll burn down, but that's, I guess. Okay. What happens if people consecrated? They made hektish, certain objects. It's an object of the city of Iranidacha. If there were things that were they're animals that were consecrated to the Mizbeach, they should die. Note, they should die. They should not be burnt, which means they would leave them to die on their own in a respectable way, because that's the din of kodesh. As we'll see, that applies to more than just this. Mizbeach, kachar mizbeach yemosu, zebach rashayim teva, because it's despised by the Eibishter, even though it's not their own. It's kodesh, right? It's consecrated. But zebach rashayim teva. Kache bedek habayis, if they consecrated something to help the Beis Hamikdash fix and the like, then, interestingly enough, yipadu. First, they have to be swapped and, so to speak, redeemed. So let's say a person consecrated a scissor to the Beis Hamikdash, and then the city was announced as an Aaron Idachas. They have to redeem it like any hektish item and make it the gvir that wants to give tzedakah, and they redeem it, and now that becomes chulin. It's not a Beis Hamikdash anymore. The money will now go to the Beis Hamikdash, and then you burn it. You destroy it. So you padu b'achar soifen es. Remember shlala v'lo shlal shamayim. So as long as it's shlal shamayim, as long as it belongs to the Eibishter, it doesn't get burnt. Halacha Yudalid. Hapchor v'maiser sheba. The pchor, firstborn, a maiser, the 10th, and the person who's tithing is behemoth. Then if they're tmimim, they're complete, without a blemish, then they're royal mizbeach. So they're like the kachim mizbeach that we described earlier, consecrated mizbeach. V'yamosu, they die. O bale mumin, if they're bale mumin, that the kedusha wasn't chal, it's not shlal shamayim, arein bechlal behemta, v'neragin, and they put to death. And we said nefesh chaya, is not burnt, is killed. Shlala is burnt, and the city is burnt, and the behemoths are killed. Hatruma shebesoicha. Now, if the truma is, and truma has kedushas haguf, can't become tamei truma. So, if it already reached the hand of a if higil yad koyin yirakvu, they should disintegrate, they should rot. They belong to the koyin. And on the other hand, they're kodesh, and therefore we don't want to burn them. So you have to make sure they disintegrate. If they're still biyad Yisrael, interestingly enough, then it's not the possession of a kohen that lives in the city, and therefore you could give it to a kohen in a different city. It never, because it's, the Rambam is going to say, asai, they're nichse shamayim, but they're kedushas haguf. From their kedushas haguf, they become kodesh, and therefore it doesn't belong to the kohen over here. You give it to a kohen in a different city. Meiser sheni, it's called the second tithing. Every time there was a second tithing, and the majority of the Shemitah cycle, which means 6 out of the 7 years, there's the second tithing. 2 of the years, on the first, on the third and the 6th, this goes to Meiser Ani. The second tithing is given to Anim, but the other years they're taken to Eretz Yisrael to eat B'Kedusha B'Tara. But the Bailam could eat it, and if he doesn't have enough time to eat it all, so you swap it for money. And then in Eretz Yisrael, you buy new fruits, and the kedusha goes to this and transfers. So Meiser Sheni, the kes of Meiser Sheni, and the money that you swap for this fruit to be able to bring there, the kis ve'akodesh shabasoicha, manuscripts, heilige, hareil yuganezu, they get buried because they're kodesh, and leidach, they're possessions of that city, belong to people. It's kachim kalim. I mean, it's for regular people to eat Meiser Sheni, and therefore they get disposed of in a respectful way. They're buried until they disintegrate. Halacha Tazayin. Final halacha for today. Kol ha'oised din bi'er nidachas. And this is the oomph. This is the inspiration behind this entire Perek. Why should people get involved in such a thing? Send shluchim, check them out. Just done the yichidim and think good with zayin good. Zokte kol ha'oised din bi'er nidachas. Anyone that's involved in judging an er nidachas is a kemakriv oila kolil. It's as if he brings up on the mizbeach a burnt offering that completely goes up to the Eibishter, which means there's no personal gain involved. We don't suspect him of anything. He should not think that there's a bad midah involved. Completely the Eibishter God. Beyond that, he's doing a favor for all the rest of the Yidden. So Masalik Charoin Af Yisrael, he chases away the Eibishter's wrath from above the Yidden. Shenemar Leman Yashem Hashem Charoin Apoy. It says in order that the Eibishter should return from his wrath. And hence he has a part in it. Or maybe, and not only that, he's a benefactor. Or maybe he's bringing down blessings and compassion from the Eibishter. The Eibishter will give you compassion. He will shower you with rachamim and herbecha. He'll multiply you. Now, I promised at the beginning of this year that I want to talk for a few minutes about Rav Gershon Edelstein. Rav Gershon Edelstein was not from our school of thought. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Panovich Yeshiva, and not by a long shot specifically a chassid. But I want to make mention a tremendous goin, and a tremendous, from my field, a tremendous Oiv Yisrael, and a tremendous Mechanech. I'm going to share a few short stories, and then his connection to Lubavitch. Also part of his Avos Yisrael. He could not stand people that didn't like other people. And there's a famous, he was one of the people they were counseled with in regards to articles going into a specific newspaper in Eretz Yisrael that was known for not being very loving to Lubavitch. And they gave him to approve an article when it was on his watch. And he said, it has to be that they should not be, you have some tinus claims against certain Yidden, they're doing certain things that you don't like. Good. It has to be in a way that no one can recognize who you're talking about. Just you're going against an Inyan, not against the people. So they erased a whole bunch of parts from the article. Give it back. He says, it's not good enough, take this other. At some point, you don't have an article. It's not about anybody. It's a what is it called? It's a research article. So they said, we have nothing to publish. So he said, okay, don't publish it. Okay? Very special Yid, and I also very much appreciate the fact that they don't cover over, this is around. He was educated by and taught by a very special chassid. His name was Reb Zalman Leib Astulin. They were both from the city of Shumitz. If I remember correctly, that's how it's pronounced. Let me check. Yeah. And yeah, city was near Smargon, dachtach, a very Lubavitcher city, and his father was the Rav of the city, and Reb Zalman Leib Astulin was then a chassid. He was a bacher, 13 years old, and he taught Reb Gershon Edelstein Gemara on condition that his father, the Rav, teaches him. He was a Talmud of Reb Chaim Brisker, and he learned by him. And then afterwards, he learned that afterwards he afterwards, when his mother got the machla of typhus, he moved to a city called Klimovich, which is in Gansen Lubavitcher city. And I really appreciate. I'm saying he was makir toiva, and he had a very warm place for Lubavitch. And I appreciate when people are honest, intellectually honest. I just got the sefer. I'm not going to mention it by name. Published by a very prominent publishing. I was gifted a sefer about a special mechanech. I'm not going to mention, but they describe his youth, and I like it. I mean, I read a lot and gleaned a lot from it. But they describe he was influenced tremendously by Yid by the name of Reb Nissen Tolushkin, the Mechaber of Taras Mayim, and they mention him as if there was no Lubavitch involved. He was Lubavitch. He was Skan Rabbanei Chabad. The little way you could know is it says they showed a picture of his matzeva because before he passed, when he was sick, this person we're discussing the subject of this book. So his Talmidim went and told him, they knew that he was close to his heart. They went to daven by the tzin of Reb Nissen Telushkin. So they showed the pictures of Matzev, you know he's allowed. Otherwise, you would think that the Brownsville that had 50 Nusach Harishos, if not more, there was no one there, right? It's not okay. It's not okay. It's not intellectually honest. You don't have to promote something that's not your school of thought. Naro pashte, and we do the same. But to make as if another doesn't exist is nicht. It's not honest. So Kochavin, very very special. I want to share two stories about Reb Gershon Edelstein. One is that there was I don't know which one to start. They showed both sides of a mechanech. One was, I'll start with the side that's giving mussar to the principal. There was once a principal that came to him and said, there's a certain boy we have to kick out of school. And he's going through, he wants to hear the reasons, and he's chazering over. So Reb Gershon Yad asks him, what's his mother's name? Says, I know his mother's name. He says, you didn't say a kapitel Tillim for him, and you tried everything. That's called trying everything. Without saying a kapitel, without shedding a tear. That's on one end. There's another Maisa, as you'll appreciate. There was once a boy, his father felt he has to have a certain yarmulke. He wanted him to have a certain yarmulke, and the manal, the cheder, said, what kind of thing is this? We have a policy. This is not only this yarmulke. That's what it was. Him said, we said, whatever the story was. So the principal said, if this is you can't stick to the rules, so then we'll move on to the next place. No, I took him to write off a child. He went to Reb Gershon Edelstein, the same one from the Rosh Yeshiva of Panovich, from the story before. So Reb Gershon hears the story, and he tells the father, what do you want this yarmulke? So he says, what are you talking about? It's the same thing. This yarmulke, they're all yarmulkes, the same thing. He says, I hear. If they're the same thing, so just buy the yarmulke that he wants. If they're the same thing, right? So it's goinus in chinuch. Side to stand up for rules and seeing the future. When you reach a little bit, not talking about how to handle children. I say also that a child, one of the children went off leider, and the father was afraid of impacting the rest of the children. Now, he knew Reb Gershon wouldn't allow him to send the child out of the house. So he was ready to go as far as renting an apartment for this child. So he came to Reb Gershon and he tells him that I'm ready to. I rent an apartment. I want to tell him officially this is his place. So Reb Gershon's listening. He says, how's he? He's not good. How the siblings? They're good. So he says, "Hey, Bazay, so what I want you to do is I want you to take the rest of your children, put them in the other apartment that you rent, and this child you keep close to you. So you'll bring him close." So Oyev Yisrael and a guy nader. I saw a picture a day before his passing, less than 24 hours. He's giving a shir Zoom from a hospital bed. Anyways, Yizichrei Baruch. And we're looking forward to bringing Vaiter Be'ez Hashem tomorrow with Kol HaTorah Kula, going through Kol HaTorah Kula with the Rambam, Perek Echad L'Yom like the Rebbe's Takana. Shkoyach for the entire Chabura for joining us.